Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. Which number is this? Is this like
28.
number 28? Welcome to number 28. I'm James S. Aaron, and today I'm joined by Jen McDonald, Jenny Green, Amy Duboff, and Michael Cooper. If you're listening to this episode, you might not be aware that Michael is currently cosplaying as Gwenpool, which is a mashup between Deadpool and Gwen Stacy from the Spider-Verse. My question, which I can't see right now, is are you wearing the blue shoes?
I am wearing the blue shoes. Yeah, I got them right here.
The blue shoes are very important.
Yeah.
When I first saw the blue shoes, I was like, why is he wearing blue shoes? Like, this is weird. And then I looked at the pictures and the blue shoes matter.
Well, in the Spider-Verse, Gwen Stacy, so in her version, actually her version of the Spider-Verse is actually kind of dark because she got bit by the radioactive spider instead of Peter Parker. And she's into ballet, so that's why she wears like blue ballet flats. And sometimes she's wearing like little flats. Sometimes she's actually wearing ballet shoes in the comics. But then Peter Parker became jealous because in her universe she's actually called Spider-Woman. But the comic is called Spider-Gwen. And then Peter Parker actually became really jealous of her, and I forget what he did. Took some sort of radioactive cocktail to make himself super powerful and whatnot. Became evil, and then she had to kill him.
Oh god.
Yeah, so that's how.
No matter which universe they're in, one of them dies. That sucks.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like
that really sucks.
It does really suck. It's just like these two can never be together. Sorry, game over.
That's tragic.
But it's also like so. I'm wearing Gwen. Or I'll stand up so people can see a little more. I'm wearing Gwen Stacy's Spider-Woman costume, and then I've got Deadpool's belt on. I've got a Deadpool hood, and right now I'm wearing a Deadpool hat because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. But it's got the hood and everything as well, so I can be fully full. It's weird though to hear when you've got like all this the hood like this around your head.
And we'll have
to stick to them.
What's that?
Does it stick to your ears?
No, it pops out enough that it doesn't. And then I'm gonna wear. It's over here. I'm gonna wear this when I'm so I'm going to PAX next week, and I'm wearing this. I'm gonna wear this Deadpool mask. Even this isn't. I have like a rubber one, and I have this cloth one, but this one actually matches the colors a lot better. So that's why I'm going. And also, it's not gonna like when you wear a rubber hood, like the one that I wore for Halloween. It is just wet on the inside when you're done. So it's like I don't want to spend a day like that under no circumstances.
You're just moist in Michael juice.
Yeah, and this one actually is actually closer to the original comic book version of Deadpool.
Yeah, it's got the little peak on the top of his head.
And he, like in the original comic version of Deadpool, he was like Deadpool is always a funny character because I don't know if people know this, but he knows he's a comic book character. That's why in the movies he's always breaking the fourth wall. Because he realizes there's actually an audience and he's talking to them, which makes his character a ton of fun. So, and then just to clarify, there is actually a Gwenpool character, which is Gwen Stacy as Deadpool. Like, so she became Deadpool instead of, I don't know if she's a canonical anywhere, if she's just a character. Well, you showed a comic book cover, so she must be canonical in some sense. And hers is basically like a pink version of the Deadpool outfit, but it's like a leotard, like a bathing suit, effectively. Because there is also Lady Gwenpool, not to be confused.
Got to make her pink and got to get her in a swimsuit.
Deadpool.
So yeah, there's Lady Deadpool. Thank you, Jen. There's Lady Deadpool as well, which is basically just Deadpool but with a ponytail.
Well, there's also Dogpool, which is.
That's right. There is Dogpool. Yeah. There's every pool.
Comic book where Deadpool like took over the universe, and so everybody was Deadpool. And
That sounds fantastic.
Deadpool originated from, but I'm not entirely certain.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So when we get into the updates, maybe you can talk about PAX and then and also about other things coming up, because Michael is going to wild extents to broaden the Aeon 14 brand and reach out into other audiences. And this is all he's not just enjoying the feel of latex on his skin. He has a plan here. So why not both? So okay, so if you're new to the podcast, we talk about all things Aeon 14 and all things Aeon 14 related, from the science behind the series to science fiction and other things that we think are cool, like Deadpool or Gwenpool. So if you want to hear about things, tell us what you want to hear about. Shoot us a message. So today we're talking about sexuality in the series and what it might look like in the far future. And so we mean like sexuality and not simply sex, and what it means to iconic characters like Cheeky, especially Tanis, Jessica, Aaron, Sarah, and Rika, and also thoughts that we've had about this subject as authors and editors. But before we get into that, why don't we talk about some updates? So, Michael, do you have anything you wanted to touch on?
Sure. So we just had The Empress and the Ambassador come out, which is like the most delayed book that I've done yet. Actually, no, it's the second most delayed book. The most delayed one's still coming. But that's one that follows Petra and Diana. Petra is the regional director of the Hand, based at Alexandria, which is the capital world of the Scythian Empire. And Petra and Diana is the Empress of the Scythian Empire. So they appeared in the book The Scipio Alliance, and they've sort of been referenced here and there because one of the largest people in the alliance is the Scythian Empire. In fact, they have the largest fleets and the most military power of anybody on the Allies side in the Orion War. They just don't have the same tech levels as other people do. And their main thing is they've been duking throughout the series. They've been duking it out with the hegemony of worlds, which is one of my favorite things too, because basically Scipio is kind of a bad place. I mean, they were about to attack and invade other groups of people just for their tech, but they're not like they're sort of bad in the way that America is bad in a lot of people's eyes. Like America is largely just trying to protect its interests, and the way it behaves in the world at large oftentimes puts it in a very bad light when the people that live in a given country may not represent the way their government operates outside their borders, type of thing. And I actually kind of wanted to tell a little bit of a story like that, and then give some sort of humanizing effects to the people that might be involved in that. I mean, Diana is still like a really capricious, crazy person practically. And for some reason, Petra finds her awesome. And that's something I'm enjoying sort of playing around with as well, because lots of times you see people just in broken relationships that last a long time, or that look broken but somehow still work. Like, I don't know if anybody ever watched General Hospital. There was a guy named Sonny. He was one of the main characters. He was a mobster on General Hospital. My wife loves General Hospital, so this is why I know these things. And her sister does too. Like, they had posters, and if there were bobbleheads at the time, they would have had bobbleheads. But anyway, so he was like this gangster.
Sure, Jill watches General Hospital. Sure.
It takes too long for anything to happen. I would never be able to make it. But his they had this girlfriend, and their relationship was really interesting because it was always like messed up somehow, and they were always like falling apart and getting back together and whatnot. So I don't usually write that stuff, so that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to write that story. And then that book is only out in Kobo until a little bit later in April, where it will come out everywhere. And I did that because Kobo is like, of all the people that I can sell books at, all the retailers, Kobo is like the only one that only sells books. So they treat authors better basically than anywhere else. Like for as far as Amazon's concerned, we're a loss leader, so that someone will buy a dishwasher, or a whole bunch of shoes or something like that. And by and large, they treat us as such. So I don't need that to complain about Amazon. It's just their business model isn't about focusing on authors, which is fine. That's what they're doing, and they're not misleading us about it or anything like that either. But yeah, so I did that with them, and then it'll come out everywhere. Oh, unless of course you go on Patreon. If you're a $10 a month or higher Patreon subscriber, then you can also get that book as part of your subscription. The people at the $5 tier get the Rika books, and then anybody at the $10 tier gets any book that I publish wide. And wide means that it's available on more than just Amazon. So the upcoming Soul Dissolution series, the Empress and the Ambassador series, the Rika series, all of those books you get for the $10 a month. And considering that usually almost every month, one of those books is coming out, you're actually it's paying for itself above and beyond the other level. So there's that. And then this Thursday is the final book in the Building New Canaan series that Jenny has.
Oh, wow.
I'm going through and adding my bits to it right now, which is it's called Athens. So obviously there's 4 planets in the New Canaan series, and Athens is the 4th. So almost the one we've been to the most as well, actually, which is kind of fun. Land. So so they're there to work on, and Aaron's there to work on the Peter, which is I've given this thing 2 names. I have to decide which one it is, but it's Planetary Exothermic Extraction Ring is what it stands for. So that's what they're working on, the Peter, which is having an issue, and they actually have to call in some engineers from the Transcend to come help them. And this is back when New Canaan and the Transcend are very much at odds with each other. In fact, the Transcend is a lot like Scipio in a way, in that basically they threatened to invade New Canaan to get them to be allies. That's sort of how it goes. And only because Sarah became the president did they really find a way to get along. Although I think if Chrissy had gotten in power, they would have ended up being all right as well. And then
a reasonable person. Yeah.
yeah. And then the following week, the Anomaly on Circa book comes out, the one that Andrew Dobell and I are co-authoring together.
Oh, wow.
That one's been very different because usually with the co-authors, what happens is we talk about the plot, we talk about what's going to happen, and then they write the first draft. And we may chat a lot about different things that are going on and directions to take the story and whatnot. But they do the first draft themselves, and then I go over it and add my parts and maybe make sure the tech works and whatnot. The one I'm doing with Andrew, though, we're actually just alternating. He writes one chapter, I write the other chapter, which is a very different way to do a story. And we're going to have to work on smoothing it a bit because normally with the way we do the co-author books, it's like everybody does full passes. So it has like more of a consistent feel as you go through it. But the one with Andrew, it's a little bit different because it's his style than my style than his style. So we're going to see how much we can make sure that blends. That'll be one of the things Jen will do as well, of course, is to make sure it's all smoothed over.
You guys make my job so easy.
But it is like interesting because like some of the parts from Amanda's viewpoint, obviously she's from a different universe, so she is going to use some different non-Aeon 14 words and stuff like that to describe things, and describe the world how she views the world versus how they view the world. So it's kind of fun in that way. And of course, she ends up meeting Cheeky and Jessica and the crew. So that's like the perfect group for her to hang out with.
Is this when she gives them the ship?
When she gives Tanis the ship, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is when Tanis gets that ship. It'll be at the end of this book.
The Mandy.
Yeah, the Mandy.
We saw that in the Bob Star story?
Okay. Actually, and then the plan is, so Amanda is Andrew's doing a crossover with Barry Hutchinson. So Amanda's going to go into the Space Team universe, which I really want to read because that will probably be like the funniest thing ever. And then he's actually doing a crossover with Michael Anderle. So Amanda and Bethany Ann, I think, are going to meet up.
Oh, wow.
Book together. And then I'm not sure where that one's going to fall. And then there's going to be one where Tanis actually goes into Amanda's universe. So he's got this whole plan. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that event has actually already passed in the series. That actually happened in the very end of War in a Thousand Fronts, when Tanis goes from the LMC to Aldebaran, which I think is how you pronounce that one. I always want to say Alderaan, but of course it's Aldebaran. So there's actually a point where Tanis and she's got like Lieutenant Mason with her, whatnot. They jump in the Mandy from the large Magellanic Cloud to Aldebaran, and then they're like, well, that was kind of weird. And that's like sort of like this. There's this really oblique reference that you could have interpreted as just being about what happened in the LMC, but it's actually referring to what happens in the book where they actually where Amanda grabs them and pulls them into her universe. So there's all sorts of little things planned. And then shortly afterwards, the Rika Rising comes out. Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. Book one in the Genevian Queen series. And then right after that, we'll have Sirius, which is the 5th book in the Enfield Genesis series, which will actually wrap up the Enfield Genesis books. And the really cool thing about that is if you remember in Building Victoria, way back when the Noctis were fleeing the Sirius system, they named their ship the Hyperion because of this other ship called the Hyperion that fled the Sirius system about 1,000 years prior. This is actually going to be the story of that event. So it's all tying together.
That's so cool.
I think that's all I got. Oh, well, that's all I got for books that are coming out. The other thing that I have this lovely thing here. I'm going to lean in.
Is that Snark?
The Snark deck. Yes. I got them. I got them printed in Italy of all places because they just had the best price, and they actually would do the box and everything at a really good price. So yeah, so these are. I put Deadpool mask there. So these are all the cards, all their cardy goodness.
So cool.
So yeah, I've got these nice Z-fold pamphlets coming that will have all the rules. So they're gonna be like a trifold type pamphlet. They'll have all the rules because I couldn't get them on anything smaller than that. And I'm also gonna have a download of that PDF up on aeon14.com. And then the one thing I'm still working on is I want to make a play mat because, I mean, you guys have all, well, not Jenny, but everybody else has played Snark. And Snark involves a lot of piles of cards.
It does.
And so I want to make this play mat that'll actually have like where manifests go and where the cargo holds are and stuff like that. So you can have all of that. Then my plan is probably like 2 decks and a play mat will be like $50. And then individual decks maybe only be like $19 or something like that. Because I got a pretty good, I bought like 250 of them. So people better buy them. I think I've sunk close to $4,000 into Snark so far. So I'd like to make some money back.
Oh, that's going to be it could be a con exclusive. Maybe not PAX, which is coming up, but later on. So, do you want to talk about PAX?
Yeah, so I was planning on going to. I've actually never been. The last con that I've been to that was like purely a fan con was a Farscape convention. So that might tell you how long ago it's been since I've actually been to like a fan only con. Everything I've been to since has been writer cons, which are fun, but there's no cosplay. So I've been thinking to myself, like, I live in Boston where there's like so many conventions. Why am I not going to these conventions? And of course, PAX is one of the biggest ones. It's a gaming convention. So it's going to be, you can go there and play Magic the Gathering. You can go there and see like the latest board games. And there's an East and a South, or West and a South PAX as well. I don't know if there's a central one. There might be. But anyway, so on top of that, a gaming company called Two Dogs reached out to me a while ago because they read Rika and they said this is such an amazing story about like how characters have to deal with being in war, because that's one of I sometimes forget, but in the first Rika book, Rika is completely broken and has to like reconstruct herself both physically and mentally. And they read, and one of the big parts of their story is about how it's a top-down sci-fi futuristic sort of I think I don't know if it's going to be an RTS or exactly or not, but one of the big things is you have to really have to work on making so your unit of soldiers has morale effectively. That's actually a big part of their game is understanding how to manage the morale of your soldiers and make sure that they're actually motivated to go back out and fight when they just went through the shit and stuff like that. So I don't know how it's going to work as a game. Like people play games for escapism, but I think it's worth exploring. So
are they doing a role-playing game or what kind of
it's a computer game or a mobile game?
It's a computer game. So it's like a top-down. It's kind of like Warcraft. It's going to look a lot like Warcraft. The view, sort of the player view, and you command a squad of soldiers, and then you have to like sort of like keep the morale up and keep them going. And I believe you can level them up in certain ways and have some sort of RPG type elements to it. And then they're going to have like a single-player training aspect to the beginning of the game that walks you through some missions and sets up the story and whatnot. And they actually want me to write that for them. So I'm going to write all of the. It's kind of like writing a screenplay, actually. So it's going to be writing effectively the screenplay, and then they'll do animations. I think it's going to be like sort of like comic book style animation that's going to go along with all of those stories. So
that's so cool.
So I'm going to be at their booth. So that's one of the reasons I'm going as well. They got me. I only was able to get tickets for 2 days. They're like, well, if you come to our booth and like hang out with us, we'll just give you a full weekend pass. And I'm like, sold. So I'm going to be there doing that. And I'll have some snark decks with me. So one person already said they're going to be around. So if you find me at PAX, I will give you a snark deck if I still have any on me. I'm only going to bring I have a really small bag I'm bringing because I don't want to have to go through the bag check, be too arduous. But yeah, so if you find me and I still have one, then you'll get a snark deck for free.
Whoa.
How I roll.
I need to fly to Boston just to get a snark deck.
There you go. Yep. Also, I learned that I can't bring Deadpool's guns. I have these relatively realistic looking boomsticks that I will not be able to bring to PAX because they look too real.
That was one thing about the Wizard Con that we were just at, and these people just, I don't want to get too much into it, but there were like people walking around in full like current modern combat gear, like looked like they just walked out of Iraq or something with ARs. And my first thought was like, holy crap, what is that? And then I realized it was cosplay, and then I was like, that's not super cool.
Yeah. Well, Boston will not, because Boston had the marathon bombing and
right.
two of the flights that hit the World Trade Center left from Boston. So, or one of the flights, two of the flights that did bad things left from Boston. I can't remember if both of them were the ones that hit the World Trade Center. So Boston is pretty particular about walking around with something like this. Like I would get stopped. And this thing actually does shoot. Like you can actually put BBs in here and this thing will shoot. So obviously they would not allow that as well.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna make little red ones. They're gonna say pew pew on them, and that's what I'm gonna go around the con with. But I'm a little bit worried. Actually, I wanted to show it, but it didn't arrive in time. But I posted in the group. I'm getting like a 3-foot long, big sci-fi weapon, and that's what I'm going to have on the second day. So
that'll be neat.
They're not going to give me a hard time. But I talked to some people, and they said that thing does not look like a real weapon, so you're going to be fine. Like it glows green. So.
And are you doing the helmet as well?
Yeah, I'm making a helmet out of EVA foam, and then I've got like a green cat suit that I'm going to wear that looks like armor, so it's going to kind of look like semi-mech light armor. And that's just basically what I'm going to wear the second day. And then the third day, I'm going as Cortana from Halo. I was originally going to be Deadpool Diva. Thanks, James. I was going to be Deadpool Diva, but the suit I got for that kind of like washed
I'm just seeing the progression here.
Oh, I know, right? It's crazy. And I got this. I saw this Cortana cat suit, and my daughter thought it was amazing because my daughter and I love playing Halo. She's like 9 years old, and she's beat every Halo game on Legendary. She's pretty damn good at playing Halo, and she is like totally in love with Master Chief. Master Chief is what she is for Halloween. It's what she is for like half the time she gets to dress up. She's always Master Chief, and she's like, "Daddy, you have to be Cortana." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll be Cortana." And on top of that, we're Unicorn Master Chief and Cortana. So, this is I know, like I mentioned this in the Facebook group, like I'm gonna be unblackmailable after this because like, you know, they feel like, what are you gonna blackmail me for? I'm gonna wear this with a Cortana catsuit to PAX this coming Sunday. So yeah, so this is Jen actually was really jealous of this particular unicorn headband because it's just fantastic. But it's $25 at Claire's, so it's like it's like one of the most expensive parts of my cosplay for that one.
Dang.
From Claire's.
I know, right? Yeah, so this is my life next weekend. I'm just going to be completely insane for like an entire weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun, and if anybody's there, happy to hang out and take pictures and do whatever. Awesome. That was a really long spiel. I'm sorry that took so long, everyone.
You know, you see authors at cons quite often. They're just sitting there at their table with their stack of books, and it's like nobody's talking to them or anything. So you might as well have fun, you know?
Yeah,
have a good time.
I used to go to a lot of business cons. Like I used to work for a software company called Acquia, and we were the enterprise solution for a content management system called Drupal, and I was one of the main engineers for all of that. So I would go to all the cons, and I love to talk to people and just sort of explain things and go over stuff. So I was actually the booth babe, you know, and because like, you know, it was all nerds. A booth babe, of course, was a dude who hadn't shaved in a couple of days, you know, and was going to talk tech to you. But yeah, I would spend all day just talking to people at the booth and whatnot. And one of the things I learned from the people who worked cons a lot is no chairs in the booth. No one sits down. Because as soon as you sit down, you become unapproachable and you start doing other things, and then no one wants to walk up to you. So you have to stand and you have to be approachable. So even when I do book signings as an author, I don't have a chair there. I stand for however long it is and approach people and whatnot. So my plan this year, provided I have the guts to actually do it, and because I spent $350 on my boomstick, my big sci-fi one, my wife is going to make me do it. But it's a business expense, so I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to be like in cosplay for every book signing I do this year. So if you come to Space Coast, I'll be cosplaying with the signing. If you come to Indie Book Fest, I'll be cosplaying at the signing. Amy and I are going to Jordan Con at the end of April. We'll be cosplaying there at their dance. Well, I will be. No one else will be. I'm just crazy.
I'll just be dressed up.
Yeah, you'll be dressed up nice and everything like that. Her husband
will wear a sequin dress. So how's that?
And she's like working on the sequin dress too. So. Or is that the right one?
I don't know if I'll wear that one. I think I'm going to wear the blue one instead. But we'll see. I might bring this other one too.
Yeah, so it's like just like a fun time going out and being crazy. So that's Jordan Con, which is actually the Wheel of Time con.
Amy, are you tugging your hair braid on purpose as you talk about Jordan Con?
I don't. I'm realizing that. Oh no, that's a nervous tick right there. I actually have to go out and dress up in something other than comfy pants.
Oh. That's just one of those things I remember from Wheel of Time was the constant hair braid tugging.
Yes, there was a lot of that, wasn't there? There's probably some subconscious thing from my youth.
Yeah, and then there's gonna be I think they're gonna have a signing again at 20 Books in Vegas in November. And I haven't figured out exactly when, but I do plan on getting to Portland. I don't know if I can get to Portland when any con is going on, just because the timing is just a real mess with everything else. But I do want to try and get to Portland, maybe have a dinner with any fans that are there, and then hang out with James and Jen.
Yeah, we definitely got to figure that out.
Yeah, so.
Cool.
All right, I'm all done.
Michael's all done. What other updates do we have? Amy, what's going on with you?
I'm working on the first book in the Serenity series, which is the one that's a spin-off of the first season of the Perseus Gate books. When they go to the Serenity Ortis. So that one follows Terry, if you haven't heard me talk about the series at all. So I am a few chapters into it and working my way through. Michael read the first page and said, I like it in all caps. So I will take that as a good sign for things as it is right now. And then we'll probably end up talking more about it and working through stuff when we're together in person. So
yeah, I'll read more about it by the time we meet in April. I promise.
Yeah. I will hope to have the entire first book written by then, so that'll be good. Cool. And then the last month has been kind of crazy with the Nebula's nomination thing, and then all the drama that fell out from that. So that derailed me for a little bit, but I'm now looking forward to going to the Nebula's conference in LA in mid-May. So it's going to be 2 transatlantic flights about 3 weeks apart. So that's going to be super awesome fun.
Nuts.
Oh man.
But totally worth it. Looking forward to meeting some other people in the writer community that I haven't seen before. So it should be good.
That's going to be great.
Cats
Jen,
everywhere.
what do you do? I know there are cats everywhere.
Did you say, sorry, did you say?
Yeah, Jen, do you have any updates you wanted to share?
Oh, I am currently going through Athens.
Mm-hmm.
So Jenny, why don't you tell us about Athens?
I've since finished another book since then. So
Wow.
I've actually almost I didn't write it in the space. I wrote it before I wrote Athens, and then I wrote Athens, and then I finished this second book. So in fact, Athens has kind of faded from my memory a little bit. But
you only finished it a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I know, but I get really focused and I find it I'm like really, really single-minded about it. So, but I still have to write the guide to New Canaan.
Yes, you do.
So I'm going to have to get back into remembering it again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun thing. We're gonna put out a guide to New Canaan that will be like just like the planets and what's on them and some capital cities and I guess stuff like that, like the places you might want to go for a vacation. You know,
Like a travel guide.
Kind of like a travel guide, or I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of had the idea that it would be about the system, about everything, how everything actually works within the colony, like the monetary system and the healthcare and education and bringing up children and all those kinds of things, because I thought the readers might be interested to read about the whole context for it, because it's boring to go into all of that detail in the actual books.
Yeah.
You know, people just want to read about the story and the characters. So I thought, yeah, but I could certainly do interesting places to visit too. Maybe I should write it as a travel guide. I don't know.
I immediately think of the NASA, travel posters that they did, like for each of the planets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would be,
That could be pretty cool.
Doing it like, a knockoff travel guide would be kind of funny. That would be really interesting.
That might do that.
I have some experience in writing travel articles, so maybe I should write it as a travel guide.
That would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Points of interest, places to avoid.
You could write. Maybe you could write a little bit too, like for people that are late coming out of cryo too, or out of stasis. Like, okay, you've just come out of stasis.
Oh yeah.
The colony's already established. Or something. I don't know. You can feel it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Isa worked for Placement Services as her first job, didn't she?
And she was making the video guides as well.
And she was making the infomentary on tier. So maybe we could, maybe I could do it that way. Yeah, that sounds a bit more fun, actually.
Yeah, totally.
Score. Let's see. I think since I haven't been on a podcast in a while, I sold a short story to the Keystroke Medium Near Future anthology that's coming up, which was kind of a fun augmented reality thing where this guy comes out one day and finds that a bunch of kids looking at his house, and there's a giant troll taking a crap on his house continuously in augmented reality, and so he has to do something about that. And so I'm in the I'm in the second pass on Eve of Destruction. So I've been debating some characters. I'm actually combining a couple characters that I think will simplify some things. But I'm pretty excited about that. And now it's like moving my brain into book 2 and what's going to happen, and just finishing up some of there's a major event that I don't want to give it away here, but if that should happen in this book or at the beginning of the next book is what I'm trying to figure out right now. And so that's what I've been finishing up. And then I got invited to write in a future law enforcement space opera shared universe that I'm trying to figure out how to do that and if the timing might work and what that would look like. But that could be pretty exciting as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
It'd be kind of cool to bring that experience to bear.
Yeah, how the timing might work out. But the main thing is just the baby, like, it's pretty much consumed our lives. Like, one of us has to go to sleep with her, and then she gets up every day at 6:30 or kicks me in the eyeball at 5 a.m. like she did this morning. And she's just her little evolutionary, like, as soon as you want to, leave the child somewhere, she just smiles at you, and now she gives hugs, and so it's
Aw.
just, yeah. So you can't stay mad at her for very long. Not that I get mad at her. I can't stay frustrated with her for very long. Um, but it just means, like, like finding a place to write that is not home has been something I've been working on. So life has changed. So,
Mm.
but yeah, things are good.
Cool.
So, okay, we should jump into our topic, which is I mean, this is one that it's funny because we've been talking about this for a while, and every time, like, we should have the sexuality show, or it started as the sex show, and then we're like, well, we should dig into that some more. Like, okay, the sexuality show, and then some people are like, yeah, nah, I don't know about that, and I guess you can read into that on who's here and who's not here.
Poor Lisa. I mean,
Poor Lisa.
let's be honest. Lisa's version of writing a sex scene was putting a sock on the door.
Well, I mean, even me, like, it makes me wonder about, because I think that's the thing about science. Like, I've been in like, I've learned a lot from romance writers, and one of the things, thinking about myself as a science fiction writer, I'm typically thinking about ideas, broad concepts, even, an adventure-based thing where characters are going to do stuff, and it's more about physicality, but I don't often think about emotion. I do think about internal aspects, but if I put two characters in a space, I'm not often thinking about when they're going to hook up, whereas a romance author, or an author who is more focused on that is kind of the first thing. And I've had that question come up a lot, like, how these two characters feel about each other. And I'm like, I don't care. They're trying to get out of the spaceship, right? And so
You'll do it really well. One of my favorite moments in one of your books, James, I haven't read the Lissa series, but the Nagoba Starl and Fuja Wong stuff, when she's taking the thing out of his head.
Oh, yeah.
In the shower, and he's like, "You're confusing me."
Yeah.
Like, that was one of my favorite moments because it was so plain spoken and so honest and so real. And it's like, how many times do we have these situations in real life where it's like, I don't know what the fuck this person is doing to me. Like, I am confused. I don't know what their intentions are. I don't know what their ideas are with where we're going. And he was just so, like, out with it, and it made me really happy, and it like totally hit me.
That was a really good scene.
Oh, thank you.
I loved it. I loved it. So you handle it really well, even if you say you're not talking about not thinking about the emotion, but I mean, that was emotion. It's like, I don't know what the hell is going on. What's going on,
But it's definitely something I've moved to think about more, I guess, and so I guess where I was going is how we obviously, Aeon 14 does have, like, sexuality is a strong part of Aeon 14, and there are some really iconic characters that express their sexuality in really interesting ways and express it through technology, and how technology influences that aspect of humanity. And I think one thing I'm really curious about, maybe to start with you, Michael, is how, when you first envisioned, okay, because we know you put a lot of thought into this when you first started, like, was this something you wanted to talk about, or is it something that kind of just came out of as you envision these characters, like, this is just something that had to be there?
No, I actually did think about sexuality a lot in the future before I started writing the series, because I thought to myself, I'm writing about people who live in a future that is a lot further away from like a Judeo-Christianity route than our current Western civilization is, at least, and then for anybody else, is going to be a lot further away from their more religious roots than it would be otherwise. So I'm like, okay, well, if we have a future where equality, like real true equality, has been around for a long time, and people they're much more logical, because I mean, I felt like they're going to be more logical. You're going to have so much information to make all of your choices on, and a lot of it's going to be, like, right now, a lot of our information is still guesswork. In fact, Lisa, who wasn't able to be here, she said that really she was reading an article where female genitalia was not fully mapped out until 1998. it was the first time they actually did MRIs on female genitalia and understood how it was really constructed. And then for everybody who wants to know, we actually all start out as female. So it's an interesting sort of way to think about it. And a vagina and a penis are the exact same muscles. If you actually look at how they're constructed and whatnot, a penis is just an outie vagina. Which I think is a hilarious way to think about it. So
it is.
And we didn't know that until not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. Like we're talking, this is like 20-year-old knowledge.
Like I was graduating 8th grade when they finally figured that out.
Yeah, and so we're still figuring a lot of things out. We've only just recently figured out that that intersex people are real. You know, and no one can really deny it. We understand a lot better now what a chimera hermaphrodite is. And there's actually one of those in the series. A chimera hermaphrodite is someone who actually has 2 separate sets of DNA and functional genitalia for both men and women. And these people do exist. And they fall under intersex. But anybody that has 2 different color eyes is a chimera. They actually have different DNA. And a lot of people absorb twins. And no one really knows about it. So you can actually have like part of a twin somewhere inside of your body. And it's something like maybe as many as 1 in 10 people actually have at least cells from a twin. Somewhere inside of their body. And sometimes they have an organ inside their body, like your stomach might actually have different DNA than the rest of your body. This stuff is very rare, but it does exist. And we didn't even know about that until a couple of years ago. We might eventually find out that like everybody has other sexual DNA or DNA from like another person inside of their body. You know, another egg got sucked in or something like that, you know, or who knows what. Or we might find out it's crazy rare and it rarely happens at all. That's why we never really noticed it. I mean, they only recently discovered that there's a skin inside of your body around all the organs, and they can't even see it when they vivisect you because of what happens when you die. But there's like this special skin membrane that's around all of the organs. Every organ has it, and it's actually like sort of this tissue that runs through your entire body. It's actually what holds everything in place. Without the special super tough skin inside of your body, your organs would just flop around all the time. They didn't even know it existed until like 5 years ago, and it's like one of the most important things in the body, as it turns out. So
I thought that was the goop when you pull out an organ, and it's like goopy.
No, it's not that actually. It's like a really super thin skin, and when it dies, it sort of disintegrates really quickly. I forget the exact details for it, but it was basically they're like, holy crap, how did we not know this existed? I mean, they kind of knew it existed here and there. They'd seen it here and there. They didn't realize it was throughout the entire body, and how important it was. They sort of just thought it was like an extra thing that was around. But I mean, so I think in the future, where in Tannis's time, this stuff isn't guesswork anymore. And they don't have to like guess what's wrong with you if you're sick. They'll just send in the nano and say, oh, look, it's this thing. We'll just fix it, you know. And they might fix it, but technically they might fix it by just telling your body to do it. Because I think one of my beliefs is like, well, your body built your body the first time. In theory, it has everything it needs to build it again if it needed to. You know, that's what our DNA is. And we're getting there now. We're like learning that you can take stem cells and from skin stem cells, because your skin is constantly regrowing all the time and it's full of these stem cells, but they're specifically programmed to make skin. But you can change them back into generic stem cells and grow anything with them. So you can imagine once we sort of nail that sort of thing, it's like, oh, well, your liver's failing. We're just going to grow you a new liver in place in your body, you know. And then when it's about halfway done, we'll pull out the old one, or the old one will just disintegrate or whatever. So this is a little bit off topic, but it kind of got into like thinking about like, okay, well, once we start doing all of that, a lot of the rules that society has built up for what is male and female, what is sexuality, what are the ways that we behave. A lot of the ways we behave with each other as a species are for the safety of the species and longevity of the species. You know, if everybody had sex with everybody all the time, we'd all get STDs and we'd all die. And probably people did do that, and they did die. And the people who didn't do that survived. That's how evolution works, basically. The people who do things that don't work die, and the people who didn't die did things that worked. And
they died having a good time.
Yeah. Well, and that's, but you see that if you look at a lot of older religions, there was a lot of societal structure put into place to keep people from being crazy promiscuous. You can behave well, and other people can behave badly, and it can impact you in a negative way, health-wise. And some people refer to that as sleeping around is bad. And sleeping around can be bad in our modern society because you can get sick, and and you might not even know it for a while. You might transmit it. But in the future, this is what I started thinking about. It's like in a future where the medicine is so good that no one's sick. And if they do get sick, it's like something that you fix in half an hour type of thing. If you provide you ketchup before half your body's disintegrated or something like that. Like what happens with all these rules that we've established to protect ourselves from things that we don't need to be protected from anymore? And then add to that the long lifespans. No one is going to be married to the same person for 400 years, except for Tanis. I mean, and I do write some things because I'm thinking I'm writing for a modern reader. And if Tanis gets married 17 times throughout the books, it's going to be really hard for people to connect with her. and I want people to connect with her. And I actually do feel that Tanis and Joe are really well suited for each other. So I think it works in their case. But if you've been following the series, Cheeky and Phineas are already off. You know, they were married for like 10 years, and now they're kind of off again. They're like seeing other people sort of scenario right now. I guess you call them polyamorous at this point. Although I mean, it's Cheeky. I guess Cheeky was always polyamorous. They were sort of understood that, like, I'm not like a one person girl here, you know, Phineas. So just, we're trapped in a spaceship for 10 years and I like you. So you get a cool accent. It's probably how that went. So yeah, I guess the very long answer is that yes, I did think about a lot of this stuff in advance, and it did evolve and grow and whatnot, but a lot of it was really based around a lot around the medical science, and then around what society would be like if the reasons for the way we behave no longer exist.
But even when people move on from their partners, they still think about them. Like Katrina still thinks about Marcus, still thinks about Tuwasa, still thinks about what could have been with Laura. I think that was her name.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because they're in relationships that, well, I mean, Katrina's kind of a tragic case where everyone she loves keeps dying, but they're still a part of her. They're still a part of her mantra. They're a part of her road, how she's gotten where she is. And I think that's true of love and the lessons that we learn from people that we love and don't love, and people we just bang. Like, we learn lessons and we take that forward with us. And, you know, I think that's
I think levels of intimacy potentially don't change. Like, that's the thing, like being sexual with someone in different ways. Like, you're right. Like, bang is such a great word, because sometimes you just want to, we just got to bang this out, right? We both have an urge we need to satisfy. But then what other process do we have to get as humans to sort of be vulnerable with each other that works in the same way, that could also be not intimate? Like, that's the thing I wonder about sometimes, is like what virtual ways we come up with that are like that, or what, as people, I had a teacher that I still think about this all the time in 7th grade, that she thought it was really funny. She made this like offhand statement about why we even wear clothes, and what would happen if the elbow was like the sexual organ, right? So don't show anybody your elbow, because that's the thing you got to worry about. But like, what in the future might be the like, oh my God, your nose is uncovered, how dare you? And what, because rubbing noses is the thing that provides people with some sort of stimulation. Like how those things might potentially change, or but really it all comes back to I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable with you in a way that is, there might be some sort of mutual satisfaction there, and how that might change or be different for people.
Amy just had a loud noise.
So everybody's really quiet about this subject too. So I think what is it?
For a really long time, so I'm giving other people time to talk.
Well, I think is there a barrier there, or are we not quite sure what to say, or I think what?
Yeah. Something I was thinking anyway was that the plentiful resources in the future are going to have a big effect on people losing their sense of taboos, and also not being so fussed about people being married or not married. Like, for example, at the moment, I think I don't know about in the US, but in the UK, about 50% of children now are born to parents who aren't married. And so they might get married subsequently, but they might have a child or two before they actually get married. And there's much less pressure to get married. And I think that's due to the excess of resources, because our lives are much easier now. So people aren't so worried about the structure of society being solid, and the structure of their lives being solid, because they know they're going to be okay virtually. In a rich country, they're going to be okay. So I think and I think the same applies to taboos. Like, James, you were saying about what if it was your nose, or what if it was your elbow that you can't. I think people people cling on to ideas of what's acceptable and not acceptable when they feel insecure in their own lives. So I think as societies become richer and we have access to plentiful resources, people feel less insecure in themselves. And so they're less likely to say, you can't do that. You mustn't live like that. You can't show that part of your body, and so on and so on.
I think that's a great point, Jamie. Like a perfect example is the fact that I'm sitting here on camera right now. You know, I'm wearing a latex catsuit and I'm going to cosplay that. I'm going to like wear this on a train next week. And like, there's a certain risk. Like, will you guys watching this video think that I'm just too freaking weird now and not want to read the books anymore, or will you be like, that's just cool, and be fine with that? And the fact that I live in an affluent society where the risk is minimal, you know, due to societal reasons and due to the fact that, like, you know, there's enough readers out there who never watch the podcast or go to the Facebook group that I'll probably be okay if they all abandon me because they think I'm too freaking weird. But I mean, like, I think like only like 5% of the readers actually engage on social media. The rest of them, they just buy the books.
It also has nothing to do with the books. I mean, not nothing, because I know.
I guess I'm saying, like, in a society where if I was in a scenario where this could cost me my job and then I would be destitute, it'd be different. But because we're in a more affluent society where I am very unlikely to become destitute for a variety of reasons, I'll take risks that I wouldn't maybe take otherwise. And I think they'll sort of filter into other areas as well.
Yeah. So I think, like, in the Aeon 14 universe, you've got access. You know, there's nobody's ever worried about starving. You know, nobody's worried about dying even. So I think they would be very, very open, like cheeky characters like that. Nobody's going to censure somebody like that in that universe.
Yeah.
And the same with people expressing their sexuality in other ways, having lots of partners, having no partners. I don't think people are going to care.
Not really, no.
Even think about it.
The other thing too is what we do in our modern society right now is when you hit about 20 years old, you're supposed to kind of know who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And then you just be that person for the rest of your life. Like, most people, like, you look like they got the same haircut, they wear the same clothes. You know, we were all idiots when we were 20. What did I know when I was 20? I was stupid, you know. Like, I wouldn't want to be me 20 as I was for 20 for the rest of my life. And then, but because we didn't used to live that long, and we still don't really live that long. Like, you're really only like super active and out there maybe for like another, at best, 60 years afterward. But imagine living hundreds of years. You're not going to want to stay the way you were when you were 20 for the rest of your life. You're going to reinvent yourself on a regular basis, just if for no other reason than you just get bored, you know. Like, it would probably be boring. A 20-year-old me would have been really boring to spend an entire life like that. It would have been terrible.
I probably wouldn't be alive.
Yeah. Amy's on the move.
There's a lot of transgenderism at the moment. I mean, the last 5-10 years, there's a lot of people wanting to change their gender and going through that process, even though it's very sort of long and onerous. And I think the nice thing about, and Dane can be too, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice thing about the Aeon 14 universe is that people, if they fancy being a woman for a while or fancy being a man for a while, they can just do that, see how it feels, and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it all comes down to the risk. You know, the risk is small, so people will do things. We used to do that in software development. We had these things called RASCI charts that were all about the risk to rolling out an update, the impact of the update, how long it takes to roll it back, all sorts of things like that. And that would determine whether or not you would do it basically on a whim or not. And so we would actually release software updates every single day, and we would look at the chart and like, this is like a low impact risk, and if it fails, it takes like 5 minutes to roll it back. And it's like, yeah, just do it. You know, and I think that will start to come into play in a lot of other areas in society and medicine and whatnot too, where the risk is so small. They're just be like, yeah, I'll give that a shot. Why not? And if I don't like it, then I'll roll it back. Right now, a full transgender change in the large number of circumstances is a one and done scenario.
Yeah, there's no going back.
Yeah, we don't possess the medical technology to really undo it.
Surgery, there's hormones that you have to take. It's like a long process.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time to get from one period or stage or form to the next. And so it's definitely not seen as like a temporary fix, and people who undergo that know that that is what they want, that is who they are, you know.
It's also $100,000 usually, because you got to do. I mean, it all depends on the person. Like some guys, when they take the hormones, they don't gain breasts, and they got to get breast implants. They might not look that much like a girl, so they got to get facial reconstruction done. And we all see like plastic surgery gone wrong, so that's one of your risks. You know, like you have like full facial reconstruction plastic surgery risk on top of all of the other risks that they end up having.
But not everybody decides to undergo the cosmetic reconstructive surgery.
I mean, it all depends on the person too. Some people look fine the way they are. Some people need more of it. But I was watching a video yesterday where this person was actually talking about that, and they said that they have no intention of actually ever getting the genital surgery done, at least not until the surgery is a lot better than it is now. Because they say they know people who just live their lives in pain as a result of it. Yeah. Or they have no sensation anymore, or a whole bunch of other things. And there's a lot of nitty gritty to it, but basically, as far as the body's concerned, it's a wound and it tries to close it. So there's problems like that too. So there's your modern science is basically like terrible, and it won't be like that in Aeon 14. It always makes me think of Bones when they're walking through the hospital in the 4 Star Trek movie. They're like, she's like, "What's wrong with you?" He's like, "Oh, it's my liver. They're gonna have to take it out." He's like, "You're doing what? They're gonna take it out?" It's like barbarism. And he gives her a pill and she grows a new liver. You know.
Yeah.
Of course, the other thing is that people don't have to get pregnant anymore in order to have children.
Yeah.
So the entire fear of pregnancy or desire to get pregnant or all of that is entirely divorced from people's sexuality.
Yeah. So you could have men that could have kids and not have to have a woman involved.
I didn't quite go there in building New Canaan, but that was definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
It was a conversation though when they were trying to decide who was going to carry the next.
Yeah, they did have that, and then they ended up with none of them were actually carrying the baby. Oh, sorry,
To be honest, I didn't want to push the reader too far when I made that decision in Troy not to actually have Martin get pregnant, because I thought that might actually be too challenging for the readership. I don't know what you think about that.
I think that's a minefield that we should avoid.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things like that are too hard to really wrap your mind around right now. And also we have to think about the medical implications of that, which aren't that well known. But at one point, James, you talked about like how you used to, I don't know if we talked about this before we actually started recording or not. We talked about like science fiction that we had read that got us thinking along these lines. And I remember when I was a kid, and I shouldn't have read Piers Anthony when I was a kid, but it was there and it had cool covers. So I picked it up and read Piers Anthony. And Piers Anthony's books are all about like gender change and species morphing and all sorts of stuff like that. And that's sort of where I dipped my toe into it. And he wrote science fiction-ish fantasy books back in the 80s. And I read another book by Vonda N. McKinter. She's actually the one who wrote the novel adaptation for Wrath of Khan. She's been writing science fiction for a long time as well. It was called Transition. It wasn't about people. It was about a starship. That actually, if you ever look up the book Transition and you look at the design of that starship, you're going to see a very iconic thing on that starship that ended up on the Intrepid. Mainly the habitation cylinders. It's got these 2 massive habitation cylinders on it. But there were people were getting changed into basically half seals. And they were there. I think they were called Selkies in the book. And that was sort of like I was like 16 years old, and I was kind of like, people think about stuff like this. People might actually do that. And at that point, I was very evangelical Christian. That was my upbringing, and I looked at that and I thought, well, this is terrible. Why would they ever do that? But then you start thinking about the situation that they're in. You're like, why wouldn't they? It's something that they can do in like 2 or 3 days, you know. So
yeah, and Ian Banks' Culture series, it's a big part of that too, where a character can just decide they would like to, they could transition or transition back, and he treats it more as like, in fact, it's kind of just an off, like so-and-so wanted to go do that, like they had a vacation or something and they just went and did that and then came back, and it wasn't any big deal that people were concerned about.
Yeah.
Steel Beach by John Varley is another one.
Mm-hmm.
What was the book?
Steel Beach.
Okay. Even the Total Recall movie, if you remember back from the 80s, the line from the Total Recall place was, what do you take on every vacation? You go as you. Why don't you be someone else? And one of the options they gave him was to go on vacation as a woman.
Well, and getting, we tie sexuality in such a way to identity, and like what happens when that's not the case, or we don't even necessarily have to think of ourselves as male or female or somewhere in between or something. Like that's really interesting to sort of think about. And like you have to, even if a person is born one way and has to wants to be different, they have to like prove to society that I know I'm actually this way, so that then they can right now unfortunately go through this very difficult procedure and be so dedicated to this other way. And what will life be like when you don't have to do that, or you don't necessarily have to choose in between, or it's really, you're right, it's a difficult thing, because so much of the way that we're acculturated is tied to that.
Yeah.
And even the way that we view the world or view other people, or the first time you meet someone, how you interact with them. Everybody's always, because that's the weird thing about our brains, right? Like I see this all the time with the baby. Like we were just joking yesterday that it's like she's just tripping balls. Like she's just staring at this thing, like trying to figure it out so hard, right? But she compares what she knows to what she thinks.
Yeah.
And like as she builds this frame of reference to the world. And that's so much of how we operate, is everything we do is trying to compare a new thing to the frame of reference. And so what happens when you don't necessarily have that frame of reference, or it'll be, could be pinned down in any different number of ways. As writers, I think it's difficult too, because we want to connect with the reader. And if you get too crazy, people are just like, what the hell? I don't get where you're going with this.
Well, we don't want, I mean, there's a lot of readers obviously who may not agree with all of these things. They might not agree that gender change is the thing that you should have happen, and you're born one way because God made you that way and you should stay that way. And while I don't precisely agree with that, I don't want to make them uncomfortable reading the stories either. I'd like them to still read the stories and whatnot. Because I think the characters are fun and interesting on their own, and that doesn't have to be like a major, and because if you put it in there and make it a big part of the story, then it sort of becomes the story, at least in our current political environment. And I don't want that to happen either. I want the story still just to be about people going through life and the struggles they're going through and that sort of thing, and have it be a bigger picture story than that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, it's also a part of their lives, so it has to be in the books. If these people were completely asexual all the time, you'd be like, really? Like we've been hanging out with them for some of these people have been hanging out for centuries, and they're like completely asexual all the time. I don't buy it.
So I just hammer them enough so they don't have time to think about it.
What was that?
I just hammer them enough that they don't have time to think about it.
There you go. Yeah, that's part of it too, I guess. But some people, like for example, Tanis doesn't react to stress situations and think about having sex at all. In fact, Tanis like rarely thinks about that. Tanis she's like the Jerry Seinfeld of Aeon 14. She's not wired like that. But other characters, in a time of stress, that's what they're going to want to go do. They're like, I'm stressed out. Like let's go bang, to use James's. Or maybe it was Jen.
That was Jen.
That was me.
So, but people do stuff like that. People react differently, and you got to show that. If everybody's one way, it's not an accurate representation of humanity, and it's not a good story.
Well, the cool thing about writing about the future is that it's fluid, it's unknown, it can go so many different directions that we can only speculate about. We can only try to follow the trajectories that we're currently on,
Yeah.
But it could go so many ways. There can be so many outcomes. That's how we get relationships like Aaron and Martin and Isa in the Kanan series, who they all connect, they all love each other, they're married to each other. And I mean, now in the society that we're in, to some people that's crazy. To me personally, that's kind of like living the dream, like being, with two people who complement me and love me, and we have our own connection and we have a connection all together. Like, I think that's really beautiful and solid, and they have a solid foundation, and they're all very different, but they understand each other too. And I think, I think that's really beautiful. And appreciate the uniqueness of that relationship in the universe, but I also appreciate that it's not a big deal. Like, nobody in their life thinks it's weird that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to Martin, Isa, and Aaron's house, you know. And I think it's really beautiful. That
was actually a big decision I made in Aeon 14. Like, you'll if you read the books, you'll notice the words gay, lesbian, trans, bi. Those words are not in the books, because they're not categories they really care about for them. You know, it's not stuff it's not a big deal. Just like we didn't have a word for hetero when it was the only thing, you know. It was just like you got married to another human. That human just always happened to be a woman, and for them it's whatever. And so they'll bring it up.
I think that was a really good decision to leave those words out, because I think that, like I was saying before, as time goes by, especially in a universe like Aeon 14, where nobody wants for anything, people are just going to stop thinking like that, because they're not going to care anymore about
labeling things like that.
It gets back to like how we're living in a transition where the labels evolve, you know, and even the idea of labeling something is an act of trying to define it and makes it fraught, you know.
I think with the current labels that we have is that there's these people who, really a lot of this stuff is because of the internet. Because before that, everybody thought they were just isolated and they thought it was just me and I'm weird and no one else is weird. And then when the internet came along, everybody said, holy crap, there's like large groups of people who feel the same way that I do. And it could be about anything. It could be like an intense love of quilting. You know, it could be all sorts of things where you finally realize like I have this tribe of people I didn't know existed before. And now we can all hang out together. And then in many respects, the labels are just like, we don't know what to call ourselves, or we want a name for ourselves so we can at least recognize that. And you find that label and you're kind of like, wow, there's like, you know, I mean, the biggest one is the nerd culture, I think, and geek culture, how that was like an ostracized thing until suddenly everybody realized, wait, we're all geeks. And then it became like the thing to be when we realized that it was perfectly fine. And it possibly is like a large minority of the population who just loves geeking out on things and collecting weird stuff and talking about it and playing games and whatnot. And actually, I think someone posted a thing too about like how millennials, it might have been in our Slack group, about how millennials just decided that this whole growing up shtick that we're all supposed to do, just why would we want to do that? It sounds terrible, you know. Take all the fun things that you loved as a kid and get rid of them, and then just work 9 to 5 and drink scotch when you get home and then pass out and do it all over again. Like, that doesn't sound like fun, you know. So we're all just like, why? I mean, I'm not a millennial, but I don't know, James, are you a millennial?
No.
How old are you? When were you born?
I'm 43. I was born in 75.
Oh, wow, that's right. You're older than me. You're the old man in the group.
I am.
I'm in this weird group of people that and you're probably the tail end of it. People who grew up with a rotary phone at home, and at the same time had computers at school. So we're actually not considered. Was it Gen X? You're a Gen Xer, right?
Yeah.
And then millennials are after. I'm thinking this weird little transition group that's actually not considered to be Gen X or millennials. So I just get to sort of say like, I'm special. You know.
Well, the note about information, I think, is really interesting, because we can join together in ways that we never could before, and we can find people that appeal to us or appeal to our sense of identity. But I also think that there are like things in our culture that are actively trying to like split us apart continuously into every little atomized category possible, because that's the easiest way to market, you know. And so I really look forward to a time when we're kind of past that. And
I do too.
You can just be, you know, you can find people like, I don't know, the culture isn't actively trying to kind of divide everything or label everything, and you can just be what you want to be.
Yeah, humans have a need to label things to understand them, and works against us a lot.
Yeah,
because it's how we create the other, you know. And if we get to a time when we are not creating the other and we can be accepting of each other, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's actually a really big theme in Aeon 14, is not othering people. And I don't really preach it, but I think it's the biggest danger humanity faces, because as soon as you can other somebody, and this becomes a left or right conversation very quickly, but as soon as you can say like people on the fringe of the left or the right are other, so we could say like, you know, like trans people are others and they're subhuman, or Nazis and crazy right-wing people are others and they're not human, then you can start saying all sorts of terrible things about them, because they're not human, they're other, they're less than human. And as soon as you make that argument, you have concentration camps. That's the next step. And be that, whether that's Jews, whether that's Ukrainians, whether that's Japanese people in California, You know, as soon as you can make that argument and say they're other, they're less than us, then there's a very rapid downhill slope that occurs right after that. And that's like our biggest danger right now, I think, in our society, is that we tend to other people so that we can hate them.
Dehumanizing.
Dehumanize them. And then once you do that, then you can do anything to them because they're not humans anymore. And you see it all the time. That's the thing. And so while these labels, they help protect people and give them a sense of unity, they also, create the ability to then other them and say, well, they've given themselves that label, so therefore they're this other group that we can think of as subhuman and say terrible things about them now.
I think we're manipulated to do that too, by political parties. That's how they,
That's their whole shtick. And that's the thing that we as thinking people have to be careful about, that we don't let ourselves fall into these traps of grouping people and then setting them aside. And it's like,
so, one thing I was just thinking about is we've been discussing sexuality in terms of identity and procreation, I guess. What about, and this is something I can't really speak to, so I don't really, maybe pulling it back to the fact that Michael's wearing a latex suit, but I know there are some folks that have really,
did Lisa join us?
Lisa just came in. So their sexuality is or they derive sexual pleasure from other things like latex, for instance, or having that, I guess, getting into fetish territory. Is that anything anyone has thought about, or how those things might evolve, or anything of that nature?
I mean, in our current society, fetish is still really taboo. So it's a risky thing to put into the books. But I mean, really, at the core, all the fetish means is you gain sexual arousal from the fetish object, not from a human being. Although 9 times out of 10, that fetish object has to be involved with a human being. There are some people who and there's stuff out there that I look at, I'm just like, I'm a pretty progressive person. You've read my books. I talk about a lot of stuff. Tannis gets turned into a squid. There's all sorts of weird stuff that goes on in the books. I'm actually personally not into tentacles, but I know some people really are. It's a huge thing. And I joke about with some of the readers who actually I think are rather into tentacles, but I don't quite get it. I don't have to get everything. But one of the ones I don't get is balloons. There are people that really get excited by balloons with no other humans involved. Not other humans be involved. At least people maybe Titan revealing outfits. The Titan revealing outfit doesn't look that good in the hanger. It's got to be on a human shaped person. But the balloon one doesn't make any sense.
I think that's kind of an ASMR thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And that's where I have to think to myself, okay, I got to take an open mind about this. It's cool for them to do that. They're not hurting anybody. They're safer than flat earthers, for example. So I mean, there's that. My wife and I always joke that flat earthers are it's nice at least they label themselves as semi-insane, so we can kind of say, okay, these people aren't quite thinking straight. But then you got to be careful not to other them and start saying terrible things about them because of that. But yeah, I mean, I don't put it in the books too much because I don't think that I don't want to spend a lot of time making so the reader understands individual fetishes that individual characters might have. But let's be honest, pretty much everybody has them to a certain degree.
You do talk about it with Cheeky and her piloting, and that is she gains from that.
Yeah. She actually makes this big argument that she actually gains arousal from being a pilot, and she thinks she does a better job when she's aroused because her senses are heightened when that's going on. I like that Lisa has joined us and she's just ghosting. She's like, when did I join? Oh crap. Oh, she's cackling.
She's just laughing.
We can't see you though, Lisa. Are you gonna talk?
No, I'm not in town.
Oh, okay. Is there so cameras don't work when you're not at your house or something like that? Is that what this means? Okay.
So you're on the phone.
Well, also, I mean, we have half the character, well, not half, I'm grossly exaggerating, but a lot of the characters are in that skin that Phineas designed, like Sarah and Fina and Serafina and who else is in there?
The entire crew of Sabrina at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that does touch the fetish kind of side of things. It's just they're living it. It's not sexualized because that's just their natural state of being. Yeah. But I think by our current standards, that would count as a fetish.
I think it might. And part of it too is the taboo nature of things. Like, I kind of wondered to myself, like, of all sorts of things that we consider to be fetish now, all of the ones that involve a human still, most of them are just taboo. And that's half of sort of the excitement from a lot of these things, is the fact, like, I get to do a taboo thing. Like tattoos used to make you badass, and now tattoos are just like, everybody has a tattoo. They don't make you badass anymore to have a tattoo. You're not rebelling against the system by having a tattoo. I mean, some people will still think you are, but give it 20 years and no one will feel that way anymore, because the people who did feel that way will all be dead. Which I think is just sort of a natural part of our progression right now. That's actually an interesting thing to talk about maybe for another time, is how will society progress when no one dies? Because all the old ideas will just stick around forever. Where was I going with this? But I do feel like any sort of thing that we consider now to be a fetish that still involves like another person probably won't really be considered a fetish anymore. I still think that people who are like into balloons, you know, and that's their thing, them and their balloons, that one's always going to be like a little bit like, that is a textbook fetish, because you are gaining arousal from the fetish object, not from another person. But then at a certain point, gets even far afield, you know, we are probably 20 years away from really good robotic partners. And you're going to start to find, people are going to start thinking to themselves like, okay, all I really want is, I want to bang. Why do I need to complicate this by adding another human into the mix? And they're just going to live that way. And that's
good. That gets them away from us people who want emotional connection. And then we don't have to fucking worry about what, you know, where it is with them.
Yeah, so your worry might be detrimental to society, but maybe it'll be really good. Maybe all the people who don't want to be around people and just want to have their robot partner will be just fine. And the people who want to hang out with other people and actually make real meaningful connections will be fine, and it'll all work out.
So you'll be a fetishist because you want those connections, which are now rare.
Yeah. What was that, Jenny?
Birth rate's going to plummet even further.
Birth rate is going to drop like a stone. And they're already having this problem in Japan. They've already got guys in Japan that just have no interest in being with a woman, and
women, who don't want to marry. Yeah.
I think I heard it seems to be more of a problem with men than women, because I think women maybe are seeking an emotional connection more than men are, but I could be wrong. That was just the one report I saw. They're actually working on trying to figure out ways to get guys in Japan to go out and look for and seek out connections with women. And there's a movement that's large, I think, in the United States. It's got a lot of political elements, but it's called Men Going Their Own Way, which is where basically it's these men that decide that relationships with women are not worth it from a cost-benefit analysis, is what they say. That's their shtick. I don't buy into it. I mean, I would never want to be like this, but they're basically just saying, like, it's not worth it. There's too much risk being involved with a woman, so we're just basically just not going to have women in our lives, and that's what they do.
That's healthy.
Is it what?
That's healthy.
I thought you could say it's ugly, and it kind of is in some respects.
That's also ugly.
That, and there goes your birth rate too.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, sorry, go ahead, Jenny or Jen.
Does it stem from them actually believing that, or is it like, does it come from rejection, where like they can't maybe get the women that they want, so they're like, well, whatever, we don't want it anyway, it's fine.
I suspect there's all sorts of people that come into that movement for a variety of different reasons. I mean, there could be guys that just had really bad divorces and just decided, you know what, I'm not interested in doing this again. And there could be guys that, for a variety of reasons, don't possess the social skills to get along with women and find a female partner that might get into it as well. But then you think, well, they might not need to, and maybe it'll actually end up being all right, because the technology that we'll get will end up solving that problem for us, so that they can actually have a robotic female partner or male partner or whatever they want to have. And you do wonder, like, you're gonna get a lot of like really weird communes and stuff like that will crop up. But then the flip side to what we addressed in Building New Canaan is that you don't necessarily need two people having sex to have kids anymore. So maybe that won't affect the birth rate. Maybe we can already grow humans not inside of a womb. And we're not terribly good at it yet, but it's possible. And you don't want to do it for too long, because it's really complicated, but we're probably not that far away from 100% test tube babies that never actually exist inside of a human womb. And give it like a century, and it might actually be the normal way to do it, because women's bodies take a beating from having kids. So it might be a lot of women like, I would love to have a kid, but I really don't want to actually have like my abdominal wall not function properly for the rest of my life. So, or have my feet become like, you know, larger than they used to be and never return back to the previous size that they used to be at. Yeah, with almost every pregnant woman I know, they have to buy all new shoes after they give birth. Their feet never go back to the same size again.
But I wonder too if that will affect the actual connection, in terms of like having that bond
The
with your
parent-child bond.
What?
The parent-child bond.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
that knowledge that like you were inside me, you were physically a part of me for this period in my life, and these are the trials that I faced while you were a part of me, but we did that together, you know. And those emotions kind of flood through that connection too, which go ahead.
I think it will evolve. I think it's just like if people get their sexual satisfaction from whatever, an app, they might still find other ways to connect with people, in other ways. You know, we keep creating new communities, new ways of connecting. I mean, maybe I get my emotional support from other humans in an online game, and then I get my sexual satisfaction from something else. And same thing with kids. Like, I think, obviously, I think what you're saying is absolutely a huge part of our current experience with being a parent, but people might transition to where just the fact that you brought the baby home and that was your moment of bonding, and then, moving on from there. I don't know. I think one of the weirdest things about humans is that we just continually sort of adjust and evolve with how we do these things. I mean, kids all survive now. Like, it used to be that you didn't even think of the child as a human until they got to be like, what, 2 or something, because so many died, unfortunately.
A lot of people didn't name them until they hit like 2 or 3 years old because they didn't want to they were trying not to make that emotional connection and have the kid die.
I'd say one positive thing to come out of it would be that people actually want to have the child if they're making a conscious decision to procreate. Then it's something that they are really that they're wanting in their lives rather than the accidental pregnancy thing. And a lot of those turn out to be wonderful parents. But I also have heard stories of people who they had a child that was sort of an accident, and they never fully bonded with it. And
totally.
That's a sad situation, but it's a truth of modern society.
Yeah. And it's also interesting too, like, to think about how our society will change. Like, the biggest, and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not. If you disagree, feel free to say so, because it's not a strongly held belief that I have. But I was listening to some folks talk recently, and they said, like, the real reason why women got the right to vote and became, full citizens of society with all the same privileges men have is largely connected to sanitary products and birth control. And they actually say, like, it's not because a bunch of people got the right idea. It's not because we became more moral than we were before. It was just because the technology evolved to a point where women's lives weren't dominated by these things. Because previously, a lot of women could be pregnant all the time until they weren't able to be pregnant anymore. Like, because there's a window where you can't be pregnant after giving birth, and it varies a lot per person. But a lot of women they would be pregnant like 6, 7, 8, 12 times between when they're around 20 and when they became infertile around 35. Or went through menopause, not became infertile, sorry. So their lives were completely dominated by this. And then they were dominated by the fact that they've got 7 kids, and they're going to have 7 kids around until they're 55, 60 years old. And then when we made it so that wasn't like the dominating part of women's lives anymore, that was actually what liberated women. Not because, a bunch of white guys decided to give them the vote. It was because these women are like, I don't want to be pregnant, for the rest of my life. I want to go do other things. I don't want to make this like
women fought for it,
and they fought for it. Yes, they did, but they had the ability to fight for it as well. The options became available to them, and they leveraged that. And granted, yes, there were lots of societal things involved in that. You could make a very strong argument that the Christian belief that men and women are equal, though it took 2,000 years to fully manifest itself, was actually a part of that. But I like the fact that the technology that we developed gave us a lot more freedom that we didn't have before. And people don't really think about that. They don't think about
I was just gonna, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Because a lot of that, I mean, you think of just simple things like washing clothes and how much time that took back then.
Yeah.
So I think that has a lot to do with it.
So hopefully that wasn't a terribly offensive thing to say or not. It was just sort of an interesting idea that I heard. I thought something to think about.
I think, in general, women were disempowered by the necessity of these things. I mean, everybody has become empowered by technology in a lot of ways, where people that were shut out of systems of power, now have a voice and can be heard and can share their voice. Just like we learn about people with different experiences and different, to bring it back to sexuality, like these are like folks have a voice now and they want to be heard and recognized, and it moves into the culture so that as we look forward, these things are not as other anymore, because people have a voice they didn't have previously. So who knows what new voices will come up.
I think one of the most exciting things that we have going on for us right now is that people that previously could not speak, like you said, didn't have a voice, that could not speak up or could not really feel like they can participate in society, are now going to be there. So we're going to get so many people now that didn't really get to contribute before, they're now going to get to contribute. That's why I think a lot of the problems we face, is that, well, we've got more smart humans than we've ever had before, and we're making their ability to be smart and contribute better than we've ever had before. There's more people that can be involved in solving problems.
Is this where we bring up the voices that have not been heard yet, as in uplifted animals? Okay, I'm going to mute myself again.
This is not that conversation, Lisa. Back off.
We already did pets. You missed that podcast. You can't squeeze it into this one. For example,
I had to try.
There's probably 1.5 billion women in the world.
Get out.
What was that, Jen?
Is that it doesn't belong in sexuality. Get out.
Yeah, that's true.
We're
There's
not doing bestiality.
Okay.
Animals
not even in New Canaan.
But you think about right now on Earth, there's probably 1.5 billion women that can't actually contribute to society in the way that the four of you women here can. So we have a long way to go there too.
Yeah, and my women in sexuality. Go on.
I was just saying, think about that potential. But
yeah,
say what you're going to say, Lisa.
When I was in college, I had a women in sexuality class, and I've never forgotten the article that was entitled "Women, Dogs, and Other Unclean Animals," and and it was talking about exactly what you were just saying, Michael. How many places in the world still view women as a lesser being? Yeah.
There's places
We've got a long way to go,
where a woman who has her period has to go live in a hut for that week, and isn't allowed to talk with anybody outside of the hut. And then there's a lot of places there's no heat, there's no running water. That's just brutal. That's why my wife and I, we give a bunch of money to different charities and whatnot. The number one thing we give to is to get women out of those situations, and water. Those are the two things.
Yeah.
There was a woman who froze to death. I think she either froze to death or she asphyxiated in Nepal recently because she was in the hut, and it's obviously really, really cold up in the mountains, and she died. That was in the news just a couple of weeks ago.
That's just terrible.
It was like a menstruation hut kind of thing.
Yeah. And they were sort of trying to bring in laws to actually make it illegal to make women do that. Yeah.
Good.
Yay for living where we live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Puts things in perspective.
The science that we are born with.
The fact that it's like was Arthur C. Clarke said, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah.
William Gibson.
Was it William Gibson? Okay. Yeah, we got to work on that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a sour turn to take this conversation, but I guess it is sort of
I know.
But it's interesting to think about the world that we live in. Think about our progression. There's a lot of parts of the world that are not progressed at all, and the 1700s United States would look like a nice place to them.
I mean, we think about, because we're kind of talking about sexuality as if it's sort of one thing, but it intersects with so many other aspects of our lives, from power to economics to technology to interpersonal, so many of these things intersect. And so I might manifest sexual pleasure out of the fact that somebody hurt me, and so now I want to potentially hurt someone else, and maybe I can do that consensually, or I do it in a way that's non-consensual, because non-consensual is what satisfies that urge that's in me. And so you think about how that human, that aspect, that way that we perceive the world will potentially change or adjust based on all these new technologies, from virtual augmented space travel, so many things. It's almost difficult to even I don't know. It's really difficult for me to wrap my mind around what, like, I think Aeon 14, we've created a world where Michael's vision has manifested itself. I'm glad that you've done that, because when I try to do it, I have a really difficult time, like, really wrapping my mind around it. Quite honestly, even like 1,000 years from now, what's going to happen? You know?
I think what I try and do is I take a little bit of a utopian view, because obviously, like you say, like there's people out there who gain sexual pleasure from hurting other people, and they don't think of other people as human, and so they
Right.
think it's okay to do that. And obviously, that's like some of that is narcissism tied in with other strange things. I hope to a certain extent we'll kind of understand the triggers for some of that. I hate the thought of like mentally curing someone is a little bit distasteful to us right now, because we think like we're gonna go in and decide that you should be thinking this way because we've decided this is the right way to think, and that's terrifying, because once we have that power, you can do that to anybody. But to a certain extent, you're kind of like, you know what, there is some thinking that is wrong, and we might actually be able to go in and change that for people. So one of the advantages might be that us living out our proclivities is less dangerous than it is right now, because we're going to identify narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths at birth and possibly fix them so they're not like that at birth. Or we'll be able to identify them very easily, because we're going to have AI watching us all the time. The AI is like, that guy is like a total sociopath. And then society will be like, okay, we need to avoid this person, or make sure we don't interact with them, and we'll end up being better off. Because right now, it's very hard for us to identify sociopaths. Once you kind of know what they are, you realize there's a lot of them around. And sociopaths, just for anyone who's listening, is technically someone who doesn't actually have a conscience.
Yeah.
And they don't really view other people as full humans or full sentient beings. To them, it's very tied with narcissism in many respects. But sociopaths is actually like a medical condition.
Yeah.
It's worse. And as far as they're concerned, they're the only sentient being in the universe. And the rest of the universe exists just to service them in whatever way they happen to want. Most of them understand, and society has actually been very good for us in this respect. Society's put all these rules in place, basically says if you're a dick, we're going to put you in jail and or kill you. And that's evolved over time, basically to keep us safe from people that want to harm everybody else. So the most people got together and said, let's make all these rules so that bad stuff doesn't happen, and we can eventually have roads and power and running water 7,000 years later. And most sociopaths sort of recognize that if they want to participate in society, they have to learn how to behave properly. And they're actually usually better at it than most other people are, because they spend all their time observing how other people behave so they can mimic. But you'll see like these weird, if they encounter a new situation, they don't know how to respond to it. But I feel like in the future, we'll be able to identify them very easily and not have these dangerous people in society. And then the question becomes, what do you do with them? And maybe it's just that we put a label on them in virtual reality, and every time they walk past, they have the big S over their head, it's just, or whatever the scarlet letter happens to be at that point. I guess those are dangers as well, because then who controls that? Who decides who gets the label? It's gonna be. That's why when I wrote Aeon 14, I jumped past all of that. I'm like, I don't know. This sounds terrifying. I don't want to write about that. That sounds like a really hard time to live through. I want to write after that point when it all just works.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Lisa, I think you posed a really good question in Slack before you joined, but it's also one that I kind of wanted to avoid altogether. And it was sexuality as a weapon. In Aeon 14, we don't, we don't see that. I mean, Jessica and Cheeky tend to use their flirtations to, get things that they want, but I don't think that's unnatural. The part of your question that I wanted to avoid was you were asking, well, the common trope is that women use their sexuality as a weapon, right?
Feminine wiles, yeah.
Yes. And you were asking if men do the same thing. And as soon as I saw that question, I just kind of cringed. And in my head, I was like, yeah, it's called rape. And so, James, your conversation about like how some people derive their arousal from exerting that control over another person non-consensually, that is a thing. And it's terrifying. And I really appreciate that there's not a lot of that in Aeon 14. And Michael, I know you and I have talked about how you explicitly avoid those situations, like especially in the Warlord series, Katrina, she goes through a lot of messed up things. But you specifically did not want it to be a sexually abusive history. And And I really valued that and appreciated that, because I think it's the cheap way out in a lot of fiction that I tend to love. And sometimes I stop loving it as soon as that happens, because for someone who's lived through sexual abuse, it's not a trope, it's reality. And it's something that we spend the rest of our lives trying to recover from. And so to have it shoved into our escapism fiction is like really infuriating and heartbreaking. And I really value that you don't do that, because there are so many other ways you can cause problems for your characters that don't have them having their body used against them.
Absolutely.
And I think as well, I mean, one of the angles is that in the future in Aeon 14, in most of the societies, men are not physically more powerful to women than women to the extent that they are now. Yeah. Because women are actually, in many cases, they're just as tall as men. And there's, I actually briefly talk about that in a couple of things, but Tannis is 6'2", I think. Depending on her, and Rika is like 7'4". You know, she's a very large, powerful woman. No John Q guy is going to try and take one of them down. And actually, the only time that actually there is almost rape, it's kind of laughable, is in the books, the Dance on the Moons of Serenity, where a guy tries to rape Jessica, and it goes very badly for him.
It goes very badly for him.
Yeah, and I put that in there because I wanted to sort of, I deliberately wanted to put a message out there for guys to read that basically says, seeing a thing and being attracted to a thing, and that thing might be, in this case, was a woman's body, because he wasn't attracted to her, he was attracted to her body, which is a very important distinction, doesn't give you any possession of it. And a lot of people sort of, they create these constructs in their minds, and they might do it for the next vehicle they want. They might do it for a woman they're ogling, or a guy that they're ogling. And they create this construct in their mind. They build a fantasy, and then they believe that they have ownership over that thing that they're fantasizing about. And that's, in many cases, that's where rape comes from, where you believe that it's yours and you want to control it. There are also other reasons, that it happens as well. And there's, I think there's actually a number of completely different mental issues that cause it to happen. But I wanted to at least put that message out there to guys, say, like, you know what, there are a lot of attractive women in the series, and they're attractive because they want to be attractive, and that's just what they look. That's what a natural human body looks like. A fit, toned human body that is in good shape and healthy looks good. And there's no reason why it shouldn't. And there's nothing wrong with it looking good, but that doesn't give you any sort of ownership over it. And to feel like you can then say things or behave a certain way to a woman just because you think that you like her body. And that's the reason why I put that message in there in that particular book. And then I didn't do it in Katrina for the reasons you mentioned. I didn't want to follow that trope. And I also didn't want, like, I feel like we're writing military science fiction. People know when they're going to read Aeon 14 books that there's guns on the cover. They know there's some pew-pew. So if you have PTSD issues with weapons and fighting, there's a very clear label on the front that tells you this is not the book for you. But there's nothing on the front that says this book contains rape. We really wouldn't want someone to read one of the books and then have a PTSD issue with that, not expecting it to be coming at all. And I feel like even that scene, I led into it very clearly, so anyone reading it would know what's going to happen. So if there was someone who didn't want to read that, they would be able to identify it pretty early on and skip over it.
Mm-hmm. There was also a brief moment in Rika, the very first Rika book, that creepy doctor that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Where
creepy doctor.
Where he's like touching her and she's like, this is not okay, this is not, and there's like hints of like that tendency in him, but it doesn't happen to her. But I like how you handled it, because we could see her thought process as it was happening, and we could kind of like see the explicitly creepy behaviors in him, where it was really clear like where it could have gone and then it didn't.
Yeah.
And I really liked and hated that scene.
I remember you telling me about how much you liked and hated. I actually remember your comments on that scene. Mm-hmm. Part of it too with that one is I also want to show that for him, the reason why I didn't go anywhere sexual was that for him, she was just a thing at that point. So there was no reason for him to be sexually attracted to her, because as far as he was concerned, she wasn't even human anymore.
But I mean, as we've talked about in other parts of this conversation, there are people that are attracted to things.
Yeah.
Without another human being.
And actually, for him, to be honest, too, and it's relatively apparent, it was a power trip for him to be able to do that to her. And maybe he was getting off on it a little bit, but I really didn't want to go down that road right there. That would have gotten way too creepy.
I was going to say something when you were talking about that scene in Serenity with Jessica. something I really like about Cheeky is that she derives power from her sexuality that she places on herself. Like she knows that she knows who she is, she puts it out there, and that turns her on. And she knows that no one is going to give her more pleasure than she can give herself. And I think that's like a really amazing, powerful way to walk around in the world, you know, because it makes you almost untouchable. And it gives you the control.
It's one of the things I think that everybody likes about Cheeky, that she's not seeking that attention to make herself feel better. She just feels better just by being who she is. Mm-hmm. Which is why, like, in our modern society, if any of us encountered Cheeky, we would think she's a terrible slut. Like everybody would say, like, well, this girl sleeps with everyone all the time, and she's pretty much naked all the time. Like she's like R-rated. She couldn't even function in our modern society. But the funny thing is, like, every reader loves Cheeky, and I think it's just because she's so authentic, and she like you said, she gets all of her power from just being who she is, and she's not trying to draw it out of other people. She's not using her womanly wiles to get her way. She's just being herself, and she's not trying to get anything out of it. In fact, you could probably argue that Cheeky is, I mean, she's like kind of like, for a very long time, she's just the pilot. She doesn't get any special favors or anything like that, you know. If anything, they give her a hard time, you know, about like, you know, she got turned on the pheromones so we can actually function here type of thing. But yeah, I don't know how I created this character of Cheeky. Part of it, she came from Trans Gemini in the Andromeda TV series. Is where I got my initial inspiration for her, because Trans Gemini is actually the spirit of a star, I think. So she just doesn't really get why people think that sexuality is weird. She's like, you're like just little weird organisms, so just do whatever you're gonna do. What were we gonna say, Lisa?
Yeah, I remember you saying that about trans.
Yeah, and the portrayal of that character in Andromeda was really cool.
Yeah. You know, when you were saying that about my question, Jen, you brought it up. The reason I asked that question is because even as a woman, sometimes I will accidentally fall into some of these common tropes, like, you know, feminine wiles, and I have to catch myself doing that. You know,
I think it's an interesting idea, like, because I think about like the word feminine wiles, like, what is it? There's a promise of intimacy there. Like the question that men, I mean, absolutely men can do it too, and on the far end of the spectrum, you know, obviously like violence against people, but then the shorter end of the spectrum, like just like I just heard somebody manipulation. Yeah, somebody we were kind of joking at work because I was like out in the hallway. Somebody said, "I'm gonna go have lunch with my work wife," and I looked over at one of my coworkers and I was like, "If I ever say the word work wife, I want you to hit me with a bat." Like that's not something I would ever say at work. But this idea of like establishing false intimacy with someone, or I think those are things that, you know, both people do to each other, and like what will that look like in the future with expectations of intimacy or expectations of how sexuality might be tied to intimacy. That's kind of like, if you're having that conversation with someone and being like giving a certain level of intimacy, or I don't know, what do you mean, like if you're going to flirt with somebody and I don't know, we just do the trope of batting your eyes at them or something, like is that a promise, a suggestion? Like what are their expectations around that? That's, I don't know where I'm going.
It's exactly a control thing. Yeah.
You feel like knowing yeah, like how are you controlling them, or are you somehow what do they expect from that interaction?
Or maybe it's a power thing, you know, it's like you're attempting to gain power or control over someone by doing that, maybe.
I think when you guys talk about like what is the male version of a woman's wiles, to put air quotes in for anybody listening to this and not watching it. I mean, I know that a lot of women, and I know this because they told me, I'm not making this assumption myself, is that they're actually attracted to men who are powerful and confident. And those two things usually go together. Confident men usually become powerful because they just, people trust confident people, whether they're right or wrong.
Right, male or female.
Yeah, male or female. But male, just due to the existence of testosterone, overestimate their abilities. And women actually, due to the lack of testosterone, underestimate their abilities. And there's been a lot of studies that have shown this clinically.
I have a story about that.
And so that's one of the reasons why men actually a lot of times do better in business, because they actually just push themselves forward more, and women don't push themselves forward for. And that was like something when I was a manager, I had to be very careful about that. I'm like, okay, I recognize that this one woman who worked for me was a little bit meeker, and she was never going to ask for a raise in her entire life. So I made sure that I actually made sure whenever the guys pushed for a raise, and if I gave them the raise, I gave her the same raise, whether she asked for it or not. And and I think that might be one of the reasons why women are more attracted to power. I bring that because I don't know if it's a biological thing or if it's a societal thing, which is why I just wanted to mention that maybe women are trained in society that they need to find powerful men and then somehow leverage them to get around. But men recognize that as well, and a lot of men use their power, be that socioeconomical power or whatever, to try and get women to do what they want, and then women, play it back with trying to offer sexual favors. In many cases, not in all cases, maybe not even a large number of cases, but I think that's probably like the biggest comparison you could draw to what men might do. And I guess the other question is, then you think to yourself is, I mean, as long as it's not unethical, is it even wrong? Because I mean, if you're being unethical and you're granting favors in a business where clearly you're not supposed to grant favors, then yes, that is wrong. But in many other cases, it's kind of like, I don't know, everything we do is a give and take. Everything we do is like, I'm going to get something from you, you give something to me.
Would it be less wrong in Aeon 14 because of what you said about Rika being 7 foot tall and Tanis being 6 foot tall and women being on equal footing, so to speak, and as powerful as men?
I think it'd be less of an issue for them because I think right now there's an inherent disadvantage that women have in situations, but that will go away.
I agree.
Although I know some women that are terrifyingly large.
Am I doing that because I choose to do it, or am I doing it because there's a power disadvantage and I have to do it?
Exactly. Right now it's so hard to spot it right now. So we just basically consider it to be distasteful all the time because we can't tell if that power disadvantage is the root cause of the issue or not. That's the thing. It's so difficult to understand motivations and whatnot that we sort of say, okay, if it looks unethical, then we probably shouldn't do it because it looks unethical, and that's all we can really go with.
That's something I think about in the end. For like, if my means of communication are so much better, then it's easier to negotiate things like this. So I'm not necessarily taking advantage of someone. Obviously it's difficult to explore these kind of things in a story, but like in the future, maybe it's just if we have, like, say, even if we had the link and the link had different modes of communication where, and we don't even dig into this that much, but like where like this is the super truth mode where I cannot lie about anything and I have to tell you exactly what I want, and like different levels or something there, and like as you interact with people, there is no distrust because we can't lie, if that's possible. I don't know. I wonder about things like, does sexuality become that much safer and easier to express something because I always know I have consent because I couldn't ever deceive someone.
One thing that I touch on a little bit, and it's hard to put in the story because I think the way that people in Aeon 14 are really going to go through their world is going to be very hard for us to relate to. But I mean, every single person you're going to look at, you're going to be able to see blood pressure, you're going to be able to see skin temperature, you'll be like map their eye dilation. And even after you work with them a lot, you're actually able to establish a trend. You're like, okay, every time this person lies, their eyes dilate by this much and they tick to the left by 3 millimeters.
Everyone's got a built-in lie detector.
Yeah, everyone's going to be, so everyone's actually really good at telling other people lie. But then you think, okay, I'm probably going to have like a thing in my HUD telling me like, you are giving away all your tells that you're lying right now. And then I start to like alter my behavior. It's a chess game. You don't really know where it goes. But I do think that to a certain extent, people will be generally more honest because it's probably a lot harder to control your blood pressure and your skin temperature in a heated argument. I don't think it's like the movies where you get like the super spy that can just like fake out a lie detector easily or anything like that. I mean, maybe some people will, but I think the majority of people are you're going to be.
Except that once emotions kick in, then, the more heated the argument becomes, the less able you are to control your emotions and your ability to moderate your physical characteristics, I would think.
Unless, of course, you have a mod in your brain that alters the chemical soup your brain swims in and you don't feel the emotions anymore.
That's and you guys, I'm sure you guys talked about it before I got on, but that's such a big part of this whole thing too, is the chemical soup in your brain.
Yep. We didn't actually talk about that. No, we didn't talk about the fact that,
oh my gosh, that's such a big deal. I mean, I think I've told you guys before about the TEDx that I heard about this woman who is she's a chemistry professor some sort of a neurochemical scientist or something. She had a brain tumor, a non-malignant brain tumor, and when it was removed, it altered her brain chemistry, and to the point where she had to supplement it with pharmaceuticals in order to remain alive. And so she took that as she approached it scientifically, and she thought, well, I want to see what, I'm going to play with this a little bit. And she changed her brain chemistry to be that of a pre-adolescent boy.
Yes.
and then she changed it to be, and she experienced what it would be like to be, at different ages and different, in different sexuality at different times. And the thing that struck her the most was, I think it was a early 20s man. She said, I thought I knew everything.
I recall that.
I was super confident, and I thought I knew everything.
I mean, what'll happen when I think about, like, I won't call them mistakes, but things I've done in my life that were solely based on, certain chemical reactions with certain people, and find yourself in, like, what the hell am I doing with this person? But the sex is pretty awesome. That's like, do those things not happen anymore? Do we choose for them to happen? Do
you choose to make mistakes? Yeah. Do you choose to place yourself in a position? Yeah.
I mean, the way that we write Aeon 14 like they do.
Yeah.
And I suspect you're going to have some people that don't. They're like, I'm going to moderate every part of everything, and I'm going to be like super logical and controlled all the time. Maybe people like that sounds like a terrible way to live. I'm just going to be a chemical mess and cut loose and have some fun. And maybe they'll form groups and they'll all hang out together. Maybe they won't. I do believe, actually, one of the things that I've talked about a couple of times is there are people on Aeon 14 who live completely in Sims and are basically just like live in a vat for the rest of their lives. And I think that will actually happen a lot, but they're not interesting parts of the story because they're not
right.
Their lives are. I mean, maybe eventually I will write a story about them, but I think, like, in the grand geopolitical world, they're not noteworthy because they're not really contributing to society in any.
I think it would be interesting to write a short story about, like, maybe there's a facility or like a live-in center where all these people are living in vats, and there's like a warden who's not living in a vat, whose responsibility it is to go around and make sure that, they're still alive.
That's actually going to be in the Angela Huntress story. Is going to touch on this stuff a bunch.
Ooh, interesting.
Because the web, which is basically the moon, Luna, is the largest habitable body in the solar system, and that's where, like, the largest groups of people who just live in vats and just, like, live in the virtual world end up being. That's something I find fascinating. Like, the volume, the solid rock volume of the moon is greater than the solid rock volume of Earth's crust.
Yes, it is.
And so it's most of the other planets out there, excepting Mercury, which is gone, have liquid cores of some sort. Like, they're ice, they're all the stuff. Or I mean, the moons, the larger moons like Europa and Ganymede and all that, they're all like semi-slush, icy liquid cores. But the moon is just rock, just like Earth. So if you want to bore it out and make the whole thing like this spiderweb nest of tunnels, it would be the perfect thing to do with. And that's actually what happens. And I think that's going to be, and because of sheer volume of people and distance, that gets into how telecommunications work and, like, the speed of light transmission along connectivity, that the moon will effectively actually become a brain. And that's actually what the Huntress story is going to address, is the fact that Luna is really just a brain powered by AIs and humans who are all interconnected in this super fast web.
Which to some people is a sexual organ, the brain.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
Most people, hopefully.
I saw a story or article recently that said, like, some of the basic laws of physics mean that things interconnect in certain ways, and the logical outcome of that is a brain.
Huh.
And that what it posits, even this gets into some weird hoodoo stuff, but it posits that basically, if you actually look at the structure of the universe, it kind of looks like a brain. It looks eerily like a brain. So
that makes sense.
It's positive that the universe could actually be a thinking thing. The entire universe itself is actually a brain. It just would think on time scales that don't work for us.
Trying to sell us some crystals, Michael?
Yeah, next thing, yeah. It's the sort of thing, like, it's funny because we look at this stuff and we're like, is this even possible? And then science is like, it might actually be possible.
Yeah, no, things operate on a macro level in many ways the same that they do at an atomic level.
Yeah. It's pretty shocking.
Like the orbit of the Earth cannot be it's not, we've talked about this, it can't be a continuum, it's a quanta. So it can be in one space and it can be in another space, but it can't be in between the two. Just like the orbit of an electron has to be in one space and not another, and it can't be on a continuum. I'm getting way deep, sorry. Okay, let's move on.
What Lisa's giving is the reason why quantum physics kind of exists, because at one point they realized that the electrons pass through places they can't exist, but yet they do anyway. And then they said, we don't know anything anymore. And then that's where we are now.
The principle is that, what you're saying about the whole thing being brain is very, very, it's something that we see now on a very simple scale.
Yeah.
So it's very, very possible.
We completely diverged from sexuality.
We sure did. Do you think that, people living in VATS and living in virtual reality only, do you think that they're going to be so disconnected from who we are, the people who choose not to do that, that it's going to be impossible to even relate to them?
Probably. I guess it depends on how they choose to live out their simulated existence. They might choose to live out their simulated existence in a fantasy world. What was that, Jen?
I imagine these would be the same people that would be happy with a robot partner.
I see this being totally different though, because the robot partner, you're still interacting in a physical way. Like in the VR, you could speed up time, you could slow down time. Like they could live, 1,000 lives and still be in cryo for the course of their human life. And they could do it as a chipmunk. I mean, it'd be completely, depending on how good the sim is, it's something totally different. So there could be a whole rise of like interpreters between the sim and the physical world, because the sims live such different, I don't know.
So they'd be like asexual because they wouldn't even be.
Well, you could potentially have even a more intimate emotional relationship with someone via a sim than you could in real life. Because I imagine there would be a way to program it where you were essentially sharing a mind. And that is, which I suppose through the link, there's probably some way to get that in physical reality too. But for people who didn't necessarily want a direct physical relationship, but wanted a very intimate emotional bond, I could see them electing to be in that kind of situation.
You like Sex and Demolition Man. You guys remember that movie? Where Sandra Bullock and they put the VR helmets and Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock in the movie Demolition Man. He's in cryo for like 70 years and he comes out, they go to have sex. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to have sex with Sandra Bullock. He's pretty excited about that. And then she sits down on one side of the room, puts on a VR helmet and gives him hands on the other side of the room. He's like, what's going on? But yeah.
You forgot all about that.
You guys have never seen that movie?
Oh, I've seen it.
I saw it many years ago.
I'm remembering that scene now. I totally forgot it.
It's got, like, that movie has, it's super campy. It's got some of the best lines in the world. One of them is like, my favorite line from that movie is, in the future, all restaurants are Taco Bell. It's like, I think of that every time I see a Taco Bell.
The 3 shells. The
3 shells, yeah. The fact that you get a ticket for swearing and he just swears so you can get paper printed out and use it as toilet paper. So many good things in that movie. But yeah, like that's a really interesting question is A, will they become like a subspecies and not be able to even communicate or relate with us anymore? And B, will some of them choose? I mean, because technically, if you still have an organic brain, that organic brain is still swimming in some chemicals. Do you make it so it has like the same feedback systems we have, so it can still experience emotion? And then it's chemical soup it swims in, because our emotions are the chemical soup we swim in many senses, changing the way they act. Plus the way our neurons are firing. We honestly don't really know which is the bigger thing. Or maybe someone knows, I don't know. But yeah, or will they choose to be like completely asexual, like basically almost just like robots, experiencing some sort of thing? And maybe what I imagine is probably the whole gamut will exist. And some people will like live in sex sims all the time. And some people will be like, nope, I'm going to simulate myself as a star for 1,000 years, or something like that. Like, who knows? But people are going to do weird stuff. We know that. I mean, look at me. People do weird stuff. And it's just going to get further and further out there as the technology gives us the ability to do it.
I think as people can live forever, they will probably do all of those things eventually. They'll get bored after 100 years in a sim, and they'll have a robot for 100 years, and then they'll get married to 20 people all at once for 100 years and so on.
Everything's 100 years, eh? Can make a note.
Yeah, apparently.
Especially as society starts to say that, you know, pretty much anything is acceptable with the exception of going around killing people and that kind of stuff. But in terms of what's taboo now, and as those things become acceptable, people will be, oh yeah, you know, on a one-off I'll try that. But there are a lot of things that you might have that fleeting thought now, but you would never actually pursue it because it would be you just ruin yourself for life. Like no one would ever talk to you after you're like, yeah, I want to go just be a dolphin for a while. Just like they couldn't tell Cheeky about the dolphin world because
sex and dolphins.
Back to the dolphins. Oh, we're gonna come back to sex and dolphins. Dolphins have a lot of sex.
It just makes me think of balloons. They're just sticky balloons rubbing against each other.
Dolphin
Oh my God.
There is a inflatable dolphin fetish out there. So just be warned. Don't go searching.
There's a fetish for pretty much everything if you look deep enough now.
Yes.
I don't want to look.
I still maintain though the balloons are like I even get foot fetish more than I get balloon fetish because like foot fetish, okay, there's a human involved. Balloon fetish, like there's no human. I mean, I'm sorry if anybody watching is into balloons. That's totally cool. You can be into balloons. I just don't understand it. It's like I'm a very understanding person, but like there's this point where I just hit a cliff and I just can't understand things on the far side of that. And that point is balloons.
I mean, there I was in, it was 6th grade. We were blowing up balloons for the graduation party, and I watched Sally Smith take that balloon and stretch it out and then blow it up very carefully and slowly.
It's going to get R-rated in a couple of seconds here.
And as I watched the balloon extend out, I felt this change in my body that was something I'd never felt before. And that was when I realized that balloons represent blah, 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 blah.
Maintain our monetization.
And then I rubbed my
Very
balloon
well
on her
off the
balloon.
cuff there, James.
And then we had 2 crossing balloons.
Now I kind of feel like maybe there's someone on this podcast that's into balloons, and that maybe I shouldn't talk about that.
We're writers, man. You can come up with any of it. Come on now.
Yeah, you got to write the story for it.
It's the auto fetishes and other weird shit that I.
Oh, the car one. Yeah, cars are pretty weird too.
Yeah. Oh, those tailpipes.
I mean, the thing about it that's interesting to me is like what sparked it. That's the if there's this thing that creates
sparked.
Yeah, wah, wah.
Well played.
But if there's this thing that like creates sexual pleasure for you, like, is there an inciting incident? That's the thing. I'm not, because I don't experience this, I don't want to speak for other people, but you read stories or you see where like John Waters films where there's always like that scene that like creates the fetish, and that seems to be like, the story, which I don't even, maybe that's not even the case. Like maybe, I just know that I like to crinkle paper and it feels good to me. Whatever. So I think we've come full circle. We've been talking about 2 hours now. So
wow.
The good news is that we didn't think we'd be able to talk about this at all, and so at least we've managed to discuss the subject. So
is there anything
we got Lisa here?
I know we did get Lisa in.
Yeah.
Is there anything anybody really wanted to talk about that we did not bring up,
or thinks that we should cut out?
We'll talk about that off camera.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you checking in. As always, if you want to link up with any of us later or check out the Aeon 14 fan group on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Aeon14fans, or you can always go to Aeon14.com, or if you are in the Boston area, go see Michael at PAX. I'm sure he would. You can get some good photos going on. So until then, we'll see you on the Intrepid. It's been good talking to everybody.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.